Hello everyone, so today is a bit of a different video because I want to talk about my PhD. I have talked to a couple of people about their PhDs, and some of them have also videos which I'm friends with in here, and I thought it might be a good idea to also share my experience with my PhD. So I finished my PhD about 2.5 years ago. My PhD is in science and experimental science, so this probably doesn't apply to everybody, but I thought it will still be fun to talk about it. So this is my thesis. It's called Photovoltaic Photoelectrochemical Devices for Water Splitting and Water Treatment. That probably doesn't mean anything to any of you, but basically what it means is I studied solar cells and I studied them specifically so that I could split water into hydrogen and oxygen, because hydrogen is in many ways easy to store than electricity, especially for long periods of time. So we wanted to try to see if we could make a solar cells that create hydrogen instead of electricity. That's roughly what my PhD is about. So yeah, I always have a little bit of trouble labeling my PhD because it's very multifaceted, multidisciplinary. There are physics in there is chemistry, there's engineering, there is material science. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything. Basically, it was not a very narrowed down PhD for what PhDs tend to be, but it suited me well because I like to have the general picture more than I like to have all of the details. So yeah, and as I said, it was an experimental PhD. So I spent a lot of hours in the lab, and we basically producing the solar cells, and yeah, the solar cells are produced in a clean room, which, if you have never been in a clean room, is basically these very sterilized labs that are always at the same temperature, and the amount of humidity in there is controlled, and also the amount of particles. So you have to wear an overall to go into the clean room, and you cannot take things like paper with you because that creates particles in the air that might end up in your sample. So to protect the samples, you have to wear this thing. I'll probably put a picture or something fairly similar to what I had to wear. And it was fun the first couple of times, and then it was annoying. Like, if you have to go to the bathroom, for example, you have to completely undress and dress again. And so it takes you like 5-10 minutes to go to the bathroom or get a coffee or whatever. So yeah, it was very tiring sometimes, and also the controlled atmosphere made you really, really tired sometimes, with all the sound of the machines and everything. So in that sense, it was quite tiring and also a little bit frustrating, because I think what often happens with experimental PhDs is that they can be very frustrating because you do an experiment and you have certain results, and then you repeat the exact same experiment the week after and you have completely different results. So yeah, that was frustrating, but it's part of the process, I think, and you have to learn to embrace that, and try to make it a little bit better every time. And I think by the end, I did know my machines fairly well, so that I could control the parameters with a reasonable amount of control. Funny enough, by the way, the machines that I was using, they were nicknamed. One was Amigo, the other one was Amor, and then we had Zorro, which is just typical lab, lab humor. Anyway, but yeah, so that's a bit about what the topic was about. If you want to know more, we can talk in the comments, but I don't want to go into depth into it because I don't think it's interesting for most of you. But yeah, actually, and for me, getting the PhD position was relatively easy because I had done my master's thesis with the same group, and I had started in this same topic, and I was the only master student in that same topic, and the PhD supervisor that I had was kind of half way doing that. It was not his main focus, so it was the natural choice for them to choose me as the candidate because I was kind of the only person in the group that knew what it was about. So for me, it was not difficult to get the PhD. In the Netherlands, most of the times, how it works is not like you have to get your own funding. It's more like your professor applies for funding of a certain amount of PhDs together with like the machines they might need and the conference they might go to and all of that. And then if that funding is approved and they are able to hire a PhD. So I was hired as a PhD and I had a working contract, and in the Netherlands PhD students are often considered as working people. We have pensions and all of that. It's not like a scholarship. We are working. So for me that was a fairly easy process. And I am thankful for that. I know that other people in other countries this is a bit different. But yeah, for me that's how it was. And then so normally that funding is for 4 years. So as I said, I finished September 2018, so 2.5 years ago. And I started in May 2014. So I took a little bit more of 4 years, but basically the reason why I took that was bureaucracy. I had finished my thesis around January, February of 2018, so I was on track to finish, but it took quite a long time for my promoter to approve my thesis, and also when it was approved, I had like to choose between June and then July and August. There is no PhD defenses, and yeah, the dates in June didn't fit my supervisor's schedule, so I had to do it in September. But my work was basically finished on time, which I was really happy about. I also know that a lot of people don't get that luxury to finish at the same time, and they still have to write when their funding is finished. So yeah, I was happy that I did it on time. And basically for me the first year was getting in touch with what I was doing. And even though I had my master's thesis in the same topic, I did have a break of a year between my master's thesis and my PhD. And also because it's a different structure. Like when you have a master's thesis, you normally have a quite structured way of doing things, and you have a supervisor that supervises you quite closely. But in the PhD, it's very, very open. So I kind of had to figure out which direction I wanted to go in that first year or two. And then basically on the third year, it's when I did most of my experiments, most of my lab work. That's when I got like the big chunk of the data that are actually here. That was in the third year. And then in the fourth year, you kind of wrap it up, make some more theoretical analysis, maybe a couple more experiments to make sure that you have the right experiments in there, kind of, yeah, wrapping everything up. And also in my university, we did have to give classes and also supervise students. So I think it was 8 master students that I supervised throughout the 8 years, and also I taught 1.5 classes. Well, I assisted the professors to teach 1.5 classes. I did the labs and the practices and tutorials and things like that. But in the last year, normally they give you off so that you basically have time to finish everything up. So that's how it's structured here, and that's how my PhD work. I think most PhDs kind of work that way. Like you have 1 or 2 years in which you feel like you do not understand what you're doing, and then slowly you come to narrow it down enough to have a certain topic in your thesis and know exactly what you're doing, and then it just takes about a year and a half to actually do the stuff, at least in experimental PhDs, and then 1 year to wrap it up roughly, like publish all their papers and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that is a little bit of how it worked. I think that For me, the experience, I mean, a PhD is always hard and you're always going to be sick of it at the end, I think. That's a very common experience, I think. But I was thankful that I had a good supervisor and a topic that was interesting to me. Actually, my topic was quite, in my relationship with it was quite interesting because I did like the actual topic. Like, it felt like a puzzle that I had to solve, and I like puzzles, so I like that. But in terms of the bigger scope, I don't think I knew pretty early on that this was not going to have any impact on the bigger scale of things. Like, I was not going to come up with something revolutionary that was going to be produced in mass or something. I think most PhDs are like that, and I think it is still valuable that we have that knowledge that these things do not work. That's also valuable, and sometimes it's hard to come to terms with it because it always feels, especially, I mean, my topic was quite competitive. It's solar energy. It's a very competitive field. It's somewhere in which you have very specific parameters to measure success, like the efficiency of the solar cell. It's a very easy way to determine if you're doing things right. And being able to detach yourself from those parameters and say, there are more important things, and we are all part of this collective knowledge database in which we are all building upon, and saying that something works is as valuable as saying that something else does not work, even though it's not valued the same way in the moment. So yeah, I felt a bit that pressure of this has to work, and I knew it was not going to. But at the same time, I did like the puzzle aspect of it and the actual research of it. And also, I was lucky that my supervisor was really fitted me. I think that's, if you are thinking about doing a PhD, that's my main thing that I will advise you. Make sure that you like the group and you like your supervisor more than the topic, because the topic, I mean, it's important if you like it. I would not recommend anyone to do a PhD in something they hate, but you get out of your topic eventually, so you cannot base your PhD on your love for the topic. I think it's more important to have the right support for you, and I was lucky that I had that. My supervisor was exactly what I needed. He was not micromanaging anything. He was very easygoing, and he was always okay with anything I was trying to do, which is something that I personally appreciate. I think that doesn't work for everybody. Some people need more guidance, but for me it worked. So yeah, if you're doing a PhD, I would say make sure that you get along with your supervisor. That is something that I think it's quite important. Yeah, and I think that brings me also to a topic I wanted to discuss, because I have seen a lot of people around me and in myself as well, but not as much. I actually struggle a lot more with my master thesis. But I think mental health is a big important thing that it's not discussed enough in academia, and it's something that a lot of people suffer with. I know, at least in my university, there were a lot of people that were burned out, much more than the average, and the working environment doesn't allow you to relax. I know that a lot of people have struggled with their mental health, to not being enough, to feel like they were a failure, or that they focused so much on work that they forgot everything else. I luckily didn't feel like that too often, but I have seen friends of mine to struggle with that, and I think that's something that it should be talked more about in the academic world, because I think we still have this mentality that it is admirable to stay until 3 a.m. in the lab doing experiments, and it's still it's still good to work on weekends and not have boundaries, and I do not agree with that. And I saw for me and several of my colleagues that we took the approach of this is not how we want to live, and we left the office on time and we rarely work on weekends, I saw judgment for us, that that's not how we were supposed to do it, and more like, this other person has published, I don't know, 7, 8 papers and you have only published 2 and they are staying all night and you haven't. Why is that? And I think that that is really toxic. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm not staying in academia, because I think that I could not live with that for the rest of my life. 4 years were enough. But yeah, I think that we need to normalize the fact that people are allowed to be doing a PhD and have lives. um, but yeah, if you have any experience with that and any comments that you want to talk about, let me know. And if you are feeling down with your mental health because of your PhD, also let me know. Maybe we can chat and make it a tiny little bit better. We'll see. Another thing that I wanted to discuss, it's the fact that I am a woman, and I know that still I am privileged because I am white and I am straight, but the fact that I was a woman in a scientific study was very pointed out to me many times during the duration of my PhD, in sometimes more, sometimes less obvious ways. But yeah, I mean, for some statistics, my faculty had on average a 5% women ratio, and that is counting like bachelor, masters, PhDs, and everything. If you count everyone that had to do something to do with that faculty, there were 5% of women, and you could see that. I mean, there were less bathrooms in the building for women, so it's that it's that structural that they know, so they don't even make bathrooms. There was a floor in which we had the labs, and there were no women's bathroom in that floor. You had to change floor to go to the bathroom if you were a woman. So yeah, that was crazy. Also, when I started, in the whole department, not the group, the department, I was the only woman PhD. There were a couple of associate or assistant professors that in some other group that were also women, but I was the only PhD working full time in that department that I was a woman. And I remember the first day I went to work, and I was in the coffee corner, and there were these 2 guys that came to say hi to me that I didn't know. They were not from my group. They just came to say hi to me, and I think it's because I was a woman. And also, like, if they were having photos to put on the website, they always make sure that I was there so that they could at least show the women they had in the department. Yeah, there was also a couple of completely sexist moments. So it has gotten better. There are quite a few women now in the department. I think one of my colleagues now, it's even an assistant professor or something, which is really good. And there are several PhDs that are women now, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, at the beginning it was tough. I also got several comments several times that I only got the position because I was a woman, and they wanted to make the ratios better. And also in conferences, when they were giving prizes, every time a woman won a prize, they were like, oh yeah, they're trying to make it more gender neutral. And yeah, I mean, it was probably right, because that's how the quotas work, and that's why I don't really like the quotas. But yeah, the fact that that's the first thing that comes to mind from people is just ridiculous. Also, like, at the end when you defend the PhD in my university, at least, the PhD defense is an hour, and it's very ceremonial. There is all the professors have to wear their gowns, and the PhD candidate also has a dress code, and most PhDs, like, they wear a tuxedo. male PhDs work at tuxedo, and women are allowed to wear dresses. That's how sexist it is. It's like, yeah, you even the clothes that you wear. I wore a tuxedo, but but yeah, I was very intentional about it, and some people noticed and yeah realized how sometimes they were not taking women into account so much. But yeah, so it was. I mean, it was not always bad. My colleagues were fine, and they treat me as an equal. And I think that at some point I was, um, yeah, at the end of my PhD, obviously a lot of people were asking for my help because I knew the machines much better and stuff. So my colleagues did treat me as an equal, and I never had also problems with my students treating me different because I was a woman. But definitely on the older generation, you could really feel that. Hopefully, it's changing. There are a lot more women in my department now, and maybe they will make more women's bathrooms one day. Who knows? But yeah, I think it was important to talk about that because obviously this is very based on STEM. I don't think it's the same in literature courses or even biology things. But yeah, it was my experience with a STEM PhD that women are still not equal in that field. To wrap it up, I think that there were a lot of things that were hard in my PhD. I think that, yeah, PhDs are hard and they are also very demanding, but at the same time, you also learn a lot of things. And I am glad I did it. I don't want to stay in academia because the cons outweigh the pros for me, but I'm glad I tried it out, and I'm glad that I learned the things I learned, and that doesn't. It's not so much about the science per se, but more about the skills that you get and the confidence that you get once you do a PhD. Um, I I got a lot more confidence in my writing and my presentation skills, and I also feel like now I know I have a basis into which I can discuss certain topics that are important to me, which it's obviously important. And I love science. So I'm glad I did it because I enjoy the process of science. I just don't like the academics that go with it. So I guess that's why I went into publishing, because I can still be close to the science without having to deal with all the hierarchies and procedures and all the competition as much. But yeah, that is my take. Let me know if this was interesting for you at all. I don't know if anyone is interested, but I hope some of you are. And I also hope that you get something out of this video, especially if you're thinking about doing a PhD. And if you're doing a PhD, let me know how your experience is. I would really, really like to know. So yeah, that was all. And until next video, bye!